I have no idea what just happened.
I don't know either, but I do have to say, in the few times I try calling the other page, my new favorite thing now, because I just noticed the emoji thingy that goes with it, is the sound when something goes wrong on Skype. It just goes, oh, and it's followed by a woman trying to swing at a tennis ball and missing to complete with the noise. So it's just like an ultimate fail all the way across the board. Like, oh. Although it is
Oh
kind of
my,
sexist that it has to be a woman. Like, I think it'd be kind of funny if it was
that's
like,
what I just thought too. I was like, why is it gotta why?
I
Why
don't
is it
know.
gotta be the woman who's having
I,
some time?
I don't know.
Bullshit.
There's a lot of weird shit like that I've noticed that is oddly sexist. Like where you're just like, wait a minute, why is this way?
Yeah, and it's like once you basically kind of like not to not to overuse like the word woke or whatever, but once you're kind of like woke to the fact that like, like institutionalized racism and sexism are problems, you will notice like very subtle things like that all the fucking time. So you're
Oh
just
yeah.
like,
Well, that's like
you're like sick, cool.
I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday about how I was born with a cleft lip and palate, and so growing up, like in the 80s and such, because I was born in '84, and so growing up, it was like I was compared to graphs of normal people, and I was thinking about how like what a weird mental abuse thing like I suffered growing like in a weird like kind of white privilegey kind of way, but about how like I was compared. It'd be like, you see this graph, you're down here. People your age should be up here. You're not normal compared to everybody else, and
Oh
you're
yeah.
not going to be doing any of these things. These are all the things you're never gonna do, and it's like, well, no wonder I kind of have always had like a weird complex about like feeling like people think I'm weird or different because adults were telling me this
Oh my.
from a
If
doctor's perspective.
if you want to get into some of that on the podcast, I can talk about that specifically
Sure.
forever because that I have so many instances of that.
It's a
So
weird thing I just started like kind of thinking about for myself recently, like just kind of weird mental hangups I have about shit. And then it could be like, oh, well, no fucking wonder I have this problem. Or
right, it's
insecurity. I guess it's more
amazing.
of an insecurity, but still. All right.
Yeah.
So I have the pleasure this afternoon of talking with Laura Kashan, or Laura Kashan, or
Oh no, God.
uh, vocalist of Sharptooth and seemingly all around animal lover. So I always love talking to people who love animals. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. I'm tired, but I'm good.
Well, we're about to get woke as fuck on this podcast, so
Hell yes. I love it.
speaking of being woke, I'm gonna start off with a lyric thing that I noticed on your newest album, Clever Girl.
Okay.
So something that I kind of liked was the lyrical bookends you put onto it, with the way Rude Awakening starts to pushing. Oh, am I? You make it seem like I'm the first person that maybe noticed this.
No, but I get so excited when people do.
Okay,
Because
awesome.
I'm like, oh, first of all, you listen to the whole thing.
Yes.
Which like I know people have done, but it's the kind of thing where like that's something that I would get so excited about when I'd hear like artists that I love doing it, like tying songs into one another, having like common threads or recurring themes in an album. And like I also love like concept albums too. So I was so thrilled to have the opportunity to do something like that. And so when people mention it, I just get so giddy.
So I guess like a first question is, obviously you just kind of answered a little bit that it was something that you were definitely that you like in being a fan of music yourself.
Oh yeah.
When okay, like I guess let's go into a little bit about your writing style. Do you write just in general and kind of fit it to the music, or do you take in the music and kind of write to what you're hearing, or is it a little of both?
So I write a lot. I have like a journal that I write in almost every day. I write poetry constantly, but songwriting is a very separate thing for me from both of them.
Okay.
The way that the songwriting process generally works for me is we have like a Google Drive
Okay.
with so Lance will write instrumental tracks like pretty much constantly. He's just churning stuff out and sending it to me, and I throw it into this Google Drive. And then a lot of times, so like recently for this second album, I have this Google Drive there's about 17 instrumental potential Sharptooth tracks that are written front to back, have drums, have everything. Because Lance plays fucking everything, so he just records it all himself. And I will basically just play those over and over in my car and like see if I have concept ideas that vibe with the vibe of the song.
Mm-hmm.
And then I usually will like tag a specific song with a specific concept. And then when I just later when I have ideas for that concept, I go back to the song and I add a lyric and I take stuff out and move stuff around. And I will sometimes take stuff from my poem, take like a line from like a poem that I wrote and then put that into a song. The single from Clever Girl, the title track Clever Girl, the bridge
Mm-hmm.
and the namesake for the song. So the bridge says, "Clever girl does not forget, my mouth is dry, your blood is wet." That's a song lyric that I wrote about 10 years ago for another band that I was in, but like it was like a defunct band and totally like it was a song that was never recorded or anything. So when I first started coming up with the concept for Clever Girl, that was like, I remembered that lyric and was like, that's the key thing. That's the key thing to tie this whole song together and to create like the whole concept. Because I knew I wanted it to be a song that was like, basically tells the patriarchy to go fuck itself and is like about like destroying that and dismantling it. And I was like, we're Sharptooth, we're a dinosaur themed band. Like, what's another dinosaur theme like thing? Oh, velociraptors in Jurassic Park. The velociraptors in Jurassic Park are all female, and they're fucking up these greedy humans who thought that they could control nature. And like, it just worked. It all like fell into place. And that song, like, I basically like word vomited that song in like an afternoon, and that almost never happens. But
so was the sample, was that actually from Jurassic World?
That was from Jurassic Park.
Okay. I've been, here's the weird thing. I was trying, everything sounded so familiar, but like I just couldn't place the quote. And oddly enough, the first thing that came to my head was actually around the dance scene in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie. And
really?
I thought that was because it sounded
That's
almost
funny.
It almost sounded like Rutger Hauer. And so I was like, is this Rutger Hauer? And then I was like, it sounds like Rutger Hauer. And I was like, okay, like, where does he talk to like kind of a female, sort of in like a kind of jokey kind of tone? And I was like, the only thing I can think of was I was like Buffy, and it would be like right as they're all trying to like get into the dance at the like toward the end of the movie. So as I was like thinking about that, I was like, I really don't remember that in the movie, and so I just like it was like racking my brain. I was like, where the fuck is this quote from? So interesting to know that you carried the concept and the theme all the way even into the quote that you used.
Oh yeah, and I mean like it's in the artwork. Obviously, like the artwork is, for the record, is velociraptors. So Sharptooth and this record basically were my excuse to self-actualize the fact that I just want to be a velociraptor, and so that's this was my opportunity of doing that. It's funny because like sometimes people won't know what Sharptooth is from either, and I'm like, no, literally my whole band is just 90s dinosaur references, and it probably, I'm hoping it will be forever.
Yeah, my old band, the one band I was actually in and joined, because the only reason I joined was because I had a sweet, like, basically I looked like I could have belonged in like Blessed by a Broken Heart, basically, if you remember that band. But it was like a sweet, like, comb over thing into like a ratty tail mullet bullshit, and then I drank a shitload of my eventual singer's whiskey Coke pitcher at this bar in Western Michigan on Western's campus. This shitty bar that did like pitcher you call it for $6.75, and I drank it all. And so the dude was like, "Well, you look like you play an instrument, so come to band practice." And then I just became the bass player. Literally no tryout and didn't hear anything, and literally the day I showed up, they made me play a show, and I was like, what the fuck is this?
I kind of did that to our bass player.
I guess it's a bass player thing, because literally they were just like, it's open notes, you're good. And I was like, what the fuck? And,
our bass player was the guitarist for another band, and I basically told him that he was our bass player. He's like my best friend, so I was like, Phil,
play bass.
You're gonna play bass for Sharptooth. I hope that's fine.
Yeah, our band name was Enormosaurus.
Enormosaurus.
Yeah.
I love that.
So
That's
we
fucking
kind of
funny.
ran with the one T-shirt that we ended up making during like the big hot topic. Everything was like pink and neon colors. Was basically like almost like a Barney-esque type body on the shirt, and your arms were like where the arms come out and so forth.
Holy shit.
I wish I still had one, but
That's funny as shit.
so you guys, when I kind of saw all the dinosaur stuff, it kind of like brought back like memories of like packing into a van and driving 10.5 hours to go play in Tennessee for nobody.
Yeah. Living the dream.
Oh yeah, and this is before we had internet on our phones and shit, so I didn't have anything to do. I had my iPod Mini.
I can't imagine what touring must have been like before the internet. I
It was
literally
it was
can't wrap my head
terrible.
around that at all.
I don't know how people did it slightly even before that, because at least like we had like sort of iPods and shit, and that seemed like it would be a more, at least more fun to escape. But
Yeah.
and portable DVD players were a thing, but god damn, I can't imagine doing it before all of that shit existed. Where you actually
Yeah.
had to like communicate and hang. No wonder people broke up after an
Right?
album. It'd be like, we did a tour. Fuck you, dude. Like you smell,
I-
and the
No,
van
but-
smells like farts.
Well, that's a theme that's something that'll always be a part of your tour.
Febreze.
Yeah, my band actually, it's funny, we like talk and hang out a lot. Our thing is like we'll play like get to know you games, which like it's hard to play get to know you games when you've played them like for like 7 tours in a row. You're like, we already know everyone in the band who's done anal. Like, next, please. Like, and we get into like the weird shit. So our latest one has been something called the voting game.
Okay.
And you have to, so you read a question and then everybody votes on who the most likely person is in the band. So like one of them's kind of become my icebreaker. Just in social situations because I'm a weirdo. So the question is, who would drink their own piss for the least amount of money?
Ooh.
And so I don't know if sometimes it's me. It depends on how broke everyone else in the band is.
I was going to say there's so many variables to that, though, because it's like,
There
how
are.
broke are you?
But we streamlined it, and like, so you can always ask it at like at different times because that might change. But like, we streamlined the question to be, what's the least amount of money you would drink a shot glass of your own piss for? And I hold steady at $75.
Wow,
Yeah.
fuck it would. Then I would have been voted for this because I was like, I'd probably do it for $20.
There you go. Hey. Well, like, it's so funny because you find out some weird shit about people. So like, yeah, mine's like 75. I'm not like the most in the band by any stretch. Like Lance was like $1,000. I'm like, really? Why? I'm like, you find out people have different standards for different weird shit. And then there's like other ones like who has the most in common with Hitler, is another good one.
It's fun.
It's me.
I feel like we're like in the deleted scene of like Step Brothers here, because like a friend of mine and I, like we used to, like my best friend that I've known for like 20 some odd years, he made the joke, like somehow we got on this thing, same thing, like you just ask random questions and shit, like because you know each other for so long and you're just trying to like find a way to, like, as he said one day, as I sent him a text to try to get a joke, and and then I just rang that joke for all it's worth, and then I go, why do I feel the need to send you this shit? He goes, because we've been trying to find any way to squeeze a laugh out of each other for like 22 years. And I was like, yeah, that's true. But the thing that he was like, someone was like, got posed the question, like, how much would it cost for you to suck a dick? And then like someone was like, $1 million. I go, I bet I could suck 1 million dicks for $1 each and get to the $1 million faster than you can find the one person willing to pay you $1 million to suck it. And then, like, they were like, would you really do that? I was like, I don't know. Maybe I just came up with, like, the easiest way to make $1 million fucking dollars.
$1 a dick?
I guess. I don't know. But then someone's like, why wouldn't you do, like, $5 and, like, kind of, like, get going? I was like, again, I feel like I could find more people at $1 a piece than I could as I keep going monetarily in increments.
Well, but then here's the question, like, what constitutes a dick sucking? Are you sucking to climax?
I don't know.
Or
That's
is it just
where
a dick in the mouth for a determined.
I don't know, because like to me it's like that was like where the that's where like going to the $1 million to suck someone's dick came to, because it's like, okay, no pun intended, that at that point it's like you're literally probably for $1 million, like the dude's gonna expect you to like, you're gonna get that cum in your mouth. Like for $1 million, like I better be able to, like, you're not pulling out, you're not spitting, like you're taking it all.
I wish I got $1 million every time someone came to my mouth. I'll tell you that right fucking now.
I'm sure most women probably would feel that way.
I would be a wealthy woman. That's fucking hilarious.
So I don't know. That usually turns into the debate of like, well, I guess maybe at that point I'd be definitely selling myself short. And I would probably, like, because then that's going to take longer. Like, literally, if I was just like, I'm going to suck a dick for $1, then it's like, I'll get you going. It'll be like, I don't like being a fluffer. But then I was like, well, how much do fluffers make? Because I'm sure they make more than $1 for, like, doing that. So at that point, I need to figure out, like, what the cost thing. And then it just gets really convoluted and weird because we go down weird rabbit holes of, like, well, how much does a fluffer make? And can you, like, what do you have to do to be able to get into that profession?
And this is just why we need to legalize sex work, because
well, actually, I just saw
then we'll have some more standardized answers to all of our questions.
Well, I did see that there is a. This is how weird. I love this podcast already. Like just how weird it is.
I do too. TMI till I die.
Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
here.
So I was. I follow this this really awesome and really well educated stripper and sex educator out of Portland. Her Instagram handle is Stripper Writer, and she has a podcast called Unzipped PDX. And her and another stripper basically talk a lot about sex education and so forth. And I want to get her on this podcast, but she has her own, so I figure it's probably not going to happen. But someone commented, like she posted a thing that someone made like a watercolor of her vulva, and she made a big thing about being like, this isn't my vagina is internal, this is my vulva, and so on and so forth, and correct terminology. And someone commented, they're like, oh, this just makes me want to have a watercolor of my own, so on and so forth. And the username, which I can't remember it off the top of my head, like sounded really interesting, and like so I clicked on it. And apparently she is a sex worker at a legal brothel from what it looked like. And so she was basically to help get signatures and such for a law to kind of legalize and decriminalize sex work, like in that wherever state she's in. She was like, if you fill out this form to the local Senate or Congress and send me the screenshots that you follow through with everything and your vote basically went toward, or the signature went on, I'll send you like a video. And I was like, that's so sick. I was like, that's kind of awesome. And I was like, even though it's kind of totally taking advantage of like perverty dudes, but I was like, you know what, fuck it. Like if you can do it and you can kind of make the change that you want to see, like, then fuck it, why not do that?
Well, it's just it.
And I know that's a really extreme sense, but still.
I don't think it's taking advantage. It's saying like, hey, this is something I want. I'll exchange it for something that you want. There you go.
And then, but the weird fucked up thing is like I said, I kind of had like a weird hang up where I was like, that's kind of like, I feel like that's kind of using. And then I was like thinking about it, I go, how is it any more using than the fucking government or anybody else like passing bullshit where it's like, where it'll be like, do you like the color red? Do you also love murdering children? Then vote yes for this. And you're like, well, I do like red, but I don't like the other thing, so...
Well, and at the end of the day, I mean, it's their choice. Like, they can choose whether or not to sign the thing. It's like, it's not like they're being strong-armed into it, like,
Yeah. But,
or being like, oh, you watched this video, so you have to sign it.
Yeah.
That would be fucked up.
Yeah. It'd be like some Black Mirror shit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that would be fucked.
But yeah, so... Speaking of, well, no, that's not a good segue. There's really no good segue there, so I'm not going to even try.
We're at sex work, and that's fine.
Yeah. So kind of, I guess, more to speaking your own voice and speaking your mind and being free about that. There it is.
There you go.
So, and kind of listening to the new album quite a bit, and, even I think it was a one-off kind of single. Is it Fuck You Trump or just Fuck Trump? I don't remember which exactly.
Fuck You Donald Trump.
Fuck You Donald Trump. Yeah, okay. Obviously you are very outwardly spoken in your messages, and something I've always loved about hardcore, and I think something that kind of really got me into hardcore as a genre, was just like the ability that the everyday person can kind of speak their voice and had the platform, and as cliche as it is, like thinking of the hardcore t-shirts where it's got like the fucking a big powerful message on it with like a live shot, like the classic hardcore merch thing. It's like what about hardcore kind of like how did you get into the scene and kind of, especially as a woman? Because quick side story before I finish asking this question. So my wife and I just went out to LA to go see 18 Visions. And while we got to the venue, Martyr AD was playing. And it was interesting because like as soon as we got in, like the door basically puts you basically right onto at the Roxy. I don't know if you've ever been. Puts you right on the floor. So it's like
Wow.
we get in, there's like a beat down part going on, and like the floor is just like everyone's like flailing about and shit like that, and there's like a couple of girls in the pit just like tearing it up. And at first I wanted to be like, oh shit, like kind of mode is to like kind of be like protector and like, okay, like gotta protect myself, protect people I'm with, make sure people around me like whatever. But then it was, I had this like weird sense of like calm where I was like, this is like the environment I grew up in, like going to hardcore shows, and so did my wife. So it's like I was like, I don't have to worry about her, and like this is the environment like we both kind of mutually connected over. And so what's interesting to me and thinking about it is just like that sense of camaraderie and like typically everyone's welcome and so forth. So I always kind of like hearing stories about, especially women, about how they got into a genre that outsiders deem very violent and very male centric.
Well, it is both of those things. Like even like from an insider thing, hardcore is definitely a hyper masculine, violent, aggressive place. But those same things were kind of what drew me to it because, especially as a woman, society stigmatizes the shit out of women expressing anger. We're pretty much obligated at all times to be like thoughtful and considerate and like thinking about everybody else's feelings and like, and there's like specific words for like angry women. There's like entire tropes dedicated to like angry women. It's like, oh, she's a bitch. Like she's like a tiger mother. Like she's a dragon lady. Like there's literally like phrases for women who are fucking angry. Please find me those same phrases to describe male anger. Spoiler alert, they don't exist because it's societally acceptable for men to express and emote anger. Unfortunately, that's one of the only things it's societally acceptable for men to express and emote. So it's like we're all fucked by the patriarchy. Ta-da! And so I got into like punk music before I got into like hardcore. So I went to art school, and it's basically like a requirement for you to go to punk shows in order to like stay enrolled, basically. So like I was there as a voice major, and so I studied opera and musical theater, but I loved all different kinds of music. And even though like my background was in like show tunes and everything, I was listening to bands like Fall Out Boy and like Taking Back Sunday in high school. And then in the local Baltimore scene, my friends were also like starting bands of their own, like punk bands and indie bands, and like just basically like very counterculture type musicians. And so that was an environment that I was very comfortable in. And I didn't get super into hardcore right away. Honestly, I probably could have fucking used it at a much earlier age than I got into it, because I would hear shit like people joking around saying things like no clit in the pit, and that wasn't something that people were saying to me at the punk and indie shows when I'd want to mosh. Like I was welcome there. And I just remember having friends who would like talk about like going to like the Dillinger Escape Plan show or like the Diamond Youth show and like, oh, no clit in the pit. Ugh. Like, and I'm like, okay, you're fucking cool. Guess like I'm clearly not welcome there, so I'm not going to insert myself. Even though I was starting to get into heavier bands like by the end of high school, like From First to Last and Atreyu and like He Is Legend. I loved He Is Legend. And I went to like my first heavy show was like the 2005 Warped Tour, because I'd been going to like other shows like before that. Baltimore and Towson, where like I went to high school, had a great music scene and a great local venue that like all the big tours came through. It was called the Record Theater. But I didn't go to my first like heavy watch a heavy band until Atreyu at Warped Tour 2005. I and I got into a fight. Some guy kept, so I'm like, it's funny because like I was very used to like at the shows I would go to, hardcore dancing was a thing, even though it wasn't like hardcore shows I was going to.
Right.
Like, you weren't trying to hurt people. You were dancing and you were just enjoying yourself. And this one guy at the fucking Warped Tour that I was at, so I'm like two-stepping and this guy keeps coming up and shoving me. And I'm like, don't fucking touch me. And he did it like 3 times, and 3 strikes you're out. And I broke his nose. So if you're out there, buddy, I'm sorry that 16-year-old me broke your nose.
I think
it's fine. Kicked my ass 10 years later, and my fucking nose is broken too. So I actually got like into like hardcore and like the hardcore scene after high school. Long story short, I lived in a cult for a year. Don't really want to go down that road right now, just because it's a lot. But I lived in a cult for a year, and when I got out, I had a lot of like bottled up feelings that I didn't know what to do with, because I just spent a year of my life in a really traumatic situation where I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody about what had happened to me, and I felt crazy and I felt alone. And a guy that I was dating at the time was like, hey, I'm going to see Every Time I Die. Do you want to go? And I was like, yeah, I've listened to that band. Like, sure, like I'll go. It'll be fun. And so my first like actual like hardcore show was Every Time I Die, Stick to Your Guns in the Bronx. This was in like 2008 and or like 2000. Yeah, I think it was 2008. So it was 10 years ago. And I showed up, and like, there's such a big difference between like hearing the music in your headphones or in your car and then being at a place where there's just this controlled chaos, kind of like you were explaining. You just walk out and you're on the floor, kind of like at the Roxy, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And I just walked in, and it was almost like all of the screaming in my head fucking stopped, because suddenly it wasn't inside me, it was everywhere, and it was okay. And that was like the first time in over a year that I felt like okay. And I felt like I was somewhere that I belonged. Mm-hmm. And I immediately like just like ran into the pit, and now for the first fucking time, nobody was telling me like no Clint in the pit. Like everyone there was like super supportive and cool and picking everybody up and like was doing cool shit in there. And I felt like I was a part of something. And it was like from that minute on, I was like addicted to it. Like I had never been addicted to anything else. And so yeah, hardcore became my drugs and my religion. And so that's how all of that started. And now I'm about to play Warped Tour with them, and life is weird.
It's you know, because it's super cliche to be like, oh, you're a female fronted hardcore band, blah blah blah, and it's like, you know, I think about my time and the years that I've spent like in the scene, either, you know, because what's interesting to me is like I don't know if it's just because, you know, having Walls of Jericho be, you know, a Michigan band from Detroit, and like seeing mm-hmm. them and like having that be a constant presence, like almost like the beacon for like, this is what some of the hardcore bands the level they can get to. And it's like, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but
I think it's Candace.
Yeah, I think it's Candace. Yeah. But I mean, it's like, you know, you had, you know, Candace from Walls of Jericho, and then it's like when I lived in Lansing, you know, a lot of the bigger bands that we had locally were all fronted by women. Women like were predominantly in the crowd. So it's like, to me, really? A lot of my show going experiences from an early age going on, like it was women were ever present and not excluded but included in everything. To even like, you know, when I got into, you know, bands like Most Precious Blood, it's like, you know, you got Rachel, the guitar player, and it's like, mm-hmm. you know, like, so a lot of the things that I saw, like, it always seemed like it was very inclusive, and it was a bigger, very much that, very inclusive. So I always find it kind of interesting when I hear that it's not that way for everybody, because it's and I don't know if it's just a geographical thing, or if it's like I'm in a weird anomaly where what I experienced was not the norm for most everybody else.
Yes, what you experienced is definitively not the norm. I think part of it was, so you said that you're like 2 years older than me. So, and that wave of bands, I didn't get into and didn't know about like at all. It was like just before my time. My wave of bands was like the Taking Back Sundays and Every Time I Die,
Right.
and like those bands, and there were the only woman in any of those bands. um Even when you start getting into like the later 2000s, when metalcore was like the big thing,
Right.
the only women were Haley from Paramore,
Yep.
and I wrestled a bear once.
I was actually going to mention her. Yeah.
I don't know
She was
her
the
name,
sweet. Well, I think
but
there's been
even
like
that was like thrashy grindcore. Like, wasn't they were kind of like considered fringe, even though they were like playing Warped Tour and everything. It was they were. I just remember watching them at Warped Tour, and she was wearing like a Furby suit, and it just really. I had nothing against like the band or like her vocals or anything, but just like that wasn't what I came to hardcore for, and that wasn't what I
Right.
came to metalcore for. I came for a place where I could express these intense feelings and feel validated in them. And the fact that like the only girl doing any of this is just drunk on stage in a Furby suit, I'm like, I that just didn't relate to that at all. That wasn't what I wanted or needed from the music. So yeah, like I know it's funny because like people like maybe like 2 or 3 years older than me, they always bring up Walls of Jericho, and I'd never listened to them. I
Well,
actually didn't even know who they were.
I think they kind of
Until
broke
really-
up like around not that long around the time you're talking about, like a few years later. But I mean, like what's kind of interesting too. First side story. So a friend of mine, Chris Fox, who is the vocalist of See You Next Tuesday.
Mhm.
So I took him out to Detroit for the first date of the See You Next Tuesday iWabo tour.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, do you know anything about this band? He goes, nah, I don't really know. Apparently they're sort of like us, I guess. I don't know. And so we get there, and there's like a girl crocheting and wearing like a scarf or like a sweater and just very old looking.
Okay.
And like I was just like, okay, and just very shy and soft spoken and didn't really talk a whole lot. And I was like, all right. And then they were basically all the other dudes in the band were talking about how they just came off tour with Tony Danza Tap Dance Extravaganza, and the running band joke that I guess any band that toured with them did. And they're like, oh, they told us to tell you this running joke. And so it was just a lot of that. And then none of us knew who was who in the band. And then so as soon as iWabo goes on, they cut into their cover of Jump by Van Halen, but then just turn it all spazcore shit. And it was just like, I remember Fox and I standing next to each other like in a half-filled room at the back of the room, and then just whatever her name is just lets out like this blood-curdling scream, and we're both like, holy shit. And then I kind of looked at him, I was like, why do you have that expression? Because that's what you do. You're soft-spoken and you're pretty small. And I go, that's what you do. How do you still have that expression? Like, that's basically you. And I go, so, and he goes, oh, I don't know. It's weird that, you know, people are so shy and soft-spoken, and then that happens. And it's like, that's exactly what you do, dude. But, so it was just really weird, like, thinking about that. And then I remember telling, like, everyone, I was like, you gotta go see that band. Like, they fucking rip. But it was weird. She wasn't in a Furby thing. She was in, like, a handmade sweater thing that was, like, how do you wear that on stage? Like, I get hot wearing, like, just a pair of shorts, and I want to, like, peel my skin off. But, no, the other one, too, though, is, like, around that, like, metalcore movement, though. Like, you know, for me, like, I remember, and granted, maybe being into, like, Revolver and stuff like that, and then pushing the sexuality of everything onto its male-centric readers. But it's like, you know, I became very aware of bands like, you know, with Angela from Arch Enemy, and you had, you know, the different singers in, like, Nightwish and so on and so forth, that it always seems like there was a growing presence of women, whether it be musicians or singers in this, you know, heavy realm. But I don't know. I always like to try to gain perspective of something that I obviously can never experience. So like I like asking my wife about these things, and she's always like, you know, I remember, you know, people being really interested in this band Circle Takes a Square because they had like two vocalists, one of which was a female, and then the other one was like a dude. And she was like, oh, I never really liked them, but like I saw them a ton, and so on and so forth. So it's always interesting to kind of
I didn't know that there was a woman in that band.
I didn't either until she told me because I never saw him. But
Yeah, I haven't either.
but it's always, I just, like I said, I always like trying to gain perspective that obviously I can't have.
Sure.
So I mean, to me, it's always interesting having these conversations and just being like, okay, like we're roughly the same age. Like, what was your experience? Plus, I grew up in the Midwest. You grew up out east. So
Yeah.
I mean, in my time, good.
Well, I was just gonna say, and there is also a very distinct difference between like the more metal like scene, not metalcore, but metal.
Right.
Metal would have more women in it. And it was, I mean, I'm sure that they were still facing a whole lot of bullshit, but like, again, like bands like I don't even think it was Arch Enemy that I'm thinking of.
Are you
but
thinking
there were
of,
like a lot, like OTEP, bands like OTEP and like that kind of thing. Like that was a thing, but there were no, it's like the difference between the people who were reading like more metal magazines like Revolver and then my people who were reading AP.
Right. Good point.
So, yeah. And so metal, there were more women over in metal, but not in hardcore and not in metalcore. Which I guess is like where like Sharptooth comes in. So
kind of bringing it all the way back to your band. What was kind of interesting to me is hearing, I don't know if like I just love for me, I love the fact that you guys are kind of all over, and I hear like, to me, it's like I hear some like comeback kid influences for me. I hear, there's actually like the intro to, I can't remember this. I'm really bad about this too, because since I'm not technically allowed to have my phone on me, I leave my phone in my pocket, so I don't get to see what song titles are. So I just throw something on a loop, and it's like, okay, I think this is the beginning of track, the album, and this is the end, and this is where it repeats. But I think it's like
you tell me the words, I can tell you the song.
It's not the words for the example I'm going to make. It's actually, I think it's track 6 or 7, but it has a very AFI kind of like tone to it to start, and then it kind of goes into more of like a sort of like punky, like pop punk kind of beat to it.
6 or 7?
I think it's 6 or 7. Hold on.
Is it Rise? Yeah, it's Rise.
Yeah, like it kind of has like an AFI kind of vibe to, like, you know, December Underground, Sing the Sorrow-y kind of vibe, like just the note phrasings to me. And like there's just, it's interesting to me like how kind of all over the spectrum of different styles and genres of music and how well you're easily able to marry it. How long did it kind of take you all to collectively figure out how to do that?
That's a Lance question.
Okay.
He writes like the instrumentals, and then basically, like, to go back to like the songwriting process, once I start fleshing out lyrics for a song and we're like, okay, this is definitely a thing we're gonna do, we bring it to the band and they will take it and like make their parts their own, and then we can create something that's cohesive and everybody's. So like it's also interesting because like when you hear that song and you associate it, you're like, oh, AFI, I think The Ghost Inside. I like that song. To me, I always describe that song, and it's not that I don't think it's a good song. It's not my favorite song on the record. I think instrumentally it's incredible. I wasn't as happy with my lyrics for it as I was for the other songs, just because I feel like I could have gone further. I could have done more. But I tell people, I'm like, yeah, it's a really good The Ghost Inside song. Like that's how that song like seems to me. Like,
I think maybe that's just a difference in, I mean, even though we're not like tremendously different in age, to me, like The Ghost Inside was never really a band. I mean, I've been getting into them more recently, but it was never a band that I felt was like my band. That I like felt like the kids who are under like a few years younger than me, that's their era of bands. And
yes,
to me,
that was certainly my era of bands.
Yeah.
Like The Ghost Inside, like melodic hardcore bands like that. Like you mentioned Comeback Kid. Like Comeback Kid's a big one for me. But yeah, bands like The Ghost Inside, 100th, when they were actually a fucking hardcore band.
Whatever. I love that new 100th record.
I'm happy for you. Stick to your guns and like that kind of thing. Counterparts.
that was kind of a weird thing too, and I've mentioned it on this podcast. Like a friend of mine did, and probably will be doing Warped Tour. Actually, if he ends up getting on Warped Tour, shameless plug for my friend Frank and his clothing company, Cat Clothing. He hooked it up with a pass this year for my wife and I. Like, we surprised him because we were out east, and we were like, "Fuck it, let's go to Warped Tour." And so we went, and he gave us like an all access pass. And what was cool is like, seeing, to me, like, being interested, like having book shows and so forth, like I'm more interested in a lot of behind the scenes shit, which
Sure.
I think it'll be interesting to see if you end up doing this as well, like having never been as a band on the tour. But I was so fascinated with all the like the behind the scenes shit, like the going ons, like watching road crew, like Warped Tour road crew and the band road crew, like crews, like working together to get everything on and off and sound checked and everything. Yeah. Like, it was just really amazing to see how it goes, because I'm like, how the fuck can like band, like I can have 4 bands and like somehow someone ruins everything in a matter of like 10 minutes, and now we're like 40 minutes over and no one knows how to get their shit off the fucking stage. And it's like, yet these guys are like,
it's like, yeah, it's like a well-oiled machine.
I know,
does that even work?
I know. So I was like really kind of baffled at watching that, but we got to watch, my wife and I got to watch 100th from stage, and it was really interesting to see people watch, because they were the decidedly not heavy band on those 2 stages between the Mutant stages, because they got on the tour before they put out the new record. And so it was interesting to watch people just kind of be like, when's the heavy shit gonna happen? And then about 3 songs in, the band, or all the fans, kind of realizing that it wasn't gonna be a heavy band, and just to kind of accept it for what it was and have fun. And that's a really weird thing to be able to see from the band's perspective, because I don't think a lot of people get to see what it's like from your perspective on stage. Like, and then, you know, I'm sure you can attest to that. Like, you know, you're getting ready to do this Census Fail tour, and there's probably going to be a lot of people who don't know who you are. So every night you're going to kind of try to win people over.
Oh, I mean, that's been. I mean, we just did that tour with Anti-Flag, and like we're the.
I was going to mention that band too, having.
So like, that's kind of like our MO. We're very used to that. Like, that's our. We're used to being
sort of.
I don't know if it's because like we're a woman, like a band with women in it, but a lot of times when we first started out, we were getting put on a lot of bills that were not heavy at all. I guess
solely because of that
there's a woman in it, that it's not going to be a heavy band. And I literally opened our set one night with "We're Sharptooth," and I'm so sorry. Like, I was just like, I just knew the people there were just not prepared to have me scream at them for half an hour, which is what I do. So, yeah, no, our favorite thing, we call it the room flip, is watching people see us like get on stage and like have all the preconceived notions that they have when they see me like plugging in the microphone, and then seeing their reactions when we start, and then having them be totally fucking on board by the end of the set. Like, that's the coolest fucking thing to me, is that we call it the room flip. Just watching the whole audience go, oh, this is going to be this. Wait, what the fuck is happening? Yo, we're about it. Like, it's so gratifying. Cause like, yeah, we want to bring people in. We want to make it a universal experience, and there's something for everybody, I think, in each set. So we try to make that pretty apparent.
Something I wondered in listening to, and I'm actually gonna not try to do I think it's track whatever. I'm gonna assume, based on the song title, it's got to be "Can I Get a Hell No?" And the only reason I think it's that song is because I know there's a Jesus, the Jesus Loves You has like the weird scripture-y thing in the beginning. So I'm assuming, since I do know where roughly that song was in my head, that it's got to be that song. I've kind of wondered as I was listening to it, and the obvious message in it, and I not to make light of this, but I kind of laughed when I heard, like, when I actually was able to understand all the lyrics, because I was like, fuck, this is shit my wife says, and all of my wife's friends and all the lady friends I have, because like I'm like typically like I'm the dude that goes out with my wife, and like all of her coworkers, like I don't really hang out with a whole lot of dudes, and I never really have. And so it's always kind of funny, like I know how shitty dudes can be, and like I see how shitty like my guy friends can be. So like I'm not immune to it. And so like when I heard the song, I just kind of laughed. I was like, this is shit I've been hearing for so fucking long. Yeah. And I'm just like, and I was like, I wonder how like people write it off because like, oh, this is so cliche. Like, of course a woman's gonna like write a hardcore song about this. But then the more kind of like,
but it hasn't been written yet.
I know, and that was my thing. Is like I've never heard anyone say this, and it's like it may be cliche, like it, but it's like how like no one fucking says it. So how can it be cliche when it's not been done? Secondly, I wonder how many fucking people may even like sing, you know, listen to these lyrics or whatever, or hear the song, like, you know, when they're seeing you, and then will come to you and be like, man, you know, for a chick-fronted hardcore band, like, you were really good. And it's like, fuck, were you not listening to anything I was saying? So it's
if I had a fucking dollar, yeah, oh my God, well, you're really good for a girl. I'm like, no, I'm just good. Like, I can just be good, and that can just be the thing you say to me. I'm not good in spite of or because of my gender identity or my anatomy or anything like that. Like, yeah. So like, Can I Get a Hell No? I love that song. And, yeah, it's such a universal experience. And that's why it is bullshit that it hasn't been like, that's not a subject that's been talked about in hardcore or metalcore music, like on a larger platform. So yeah, it's like, of course I'm going to write that song, but it wasn't even necessarily, I don't even necessarily like set out to write a song to be like, I'm going to address this problem. I wrote that song because I was driving one day and sitting in traffic, and a car full of guys who started fucking harassing me while I'm sitting in traffic, and I was livid, and I needed to be able to express that through my music. So I wrote that song as a fuck you to every single person who's ever like street harassed somebody. So it's like, I'm not necessarily just being like, I'm writing things based on like my own experience and like because these are emotions I need to get out. And it's like, if somebody thinks it's cliche for a woman to need to express why that sucks, then they're part of the fucking problem, because they're not treating the actual problem. They're just whining about women whining about it. Like, fuck you. Like,
I also love the idea of like where the 2-step part is. I was like, this, I was like, it's
with the cowbell.
Yeah.
Oh,
like
yeah.
There was just like something about it where it kind of put a smile on my face, and I kind of want to be like, I know this isn't funny, but I was like, there's just, it's supposed
to vibe like that kind of like snarky, sassy.
Yeah.
I mean, you're familiar with Every Time I Die. I definitely wanted that song to have like that obnoxious, the new black or werewolf vibe. Like, it's a fun song too. It's like the fuck you, everyone, that every girl has ever wanted to say to a street harasser. Like, that's why I did like the funny, like, these boots are made for stomping lyrics. Like, I really wanted to play on those like Southern tropes too, with the cowbell and with that. And like, yeah. So it's like everything that I did with that is very intentional. And it's like, yeah, it's supposed to be fun and funny. Yeah. So I do want people to have a good time listening to our music. We talk about a lot of like miserable, terrible things, but like, you know, being able to have a fun "fuck you" song is great. So,
you kind of talk to how serious the lyrics are, you know, universally in Sharptooth's music.
Mm-hmm.
How, when you started this band, was that always the mindset and the aim for you lyrically, like that you were going to do that, or was it kind of a very like toes in approach and just kind of figuring out if it worked?
I wrote to, again, I write to my experience, and I write to what's going on in the world. So like the first, I'm trying to think. So some of the first two songs that I wrote, one of them was Rude Awakening, which is the first song on the record, it's just a song about like, hey, this is like the only fucking place I can say all this shit, so I'm going to say it. And then one of the other first songs I wrote was Give 'Em Hell Kid. And that's because all of the stuff was going down in Ferguson with Michael Brown, and police brutality was something that that like the social collective was talking about, and like that we were hearing about in the news every day. And I remember being at a friend's house, and I don't remember exactly what had happened like with the case, but basically I like it was the night that like shit went down in Ferguson, and I remember my friend's parents like bemoaning the fact that like there were riots and they were setting the city on fire, and all I could think was burn it to the ground. I was like, good, good, set things on fire, because now people will watch, because now people will pay attention. And that sounds violent and aggressive, but I believe that riots are an effusion of righteous anger, and it's not up to us to tell people how to express those feelings, especially feelings of oppression like that, and especially feelings of having to fucking fear for your life every time you walk down the fucking street. Like, I don't blame anybody for setting the streets on fire. And that's just like, I was like, I need a way to write about and talk about all these feelings that I'm having about what's going on. And so that's where it usually just, everything I write about usually just has to do with like what's going on and what I'm experiencing around me, whether that's in the news or in my personal life. There's often a lot of things that tie together with both. So
something there's a gentleman that was in a touring band, and he's very active politically, and I've tried to get him on here to discuss politics in relation to being in a touring band, even though he's not in the band anymore, and it just hasn't worked out.
oh!
So, it's Colin from the Browning.
Oh, okay.
But so interestingly, like, I've been trying to find someone I can ask this question to, and I think it'll work for you. But it's something I've been really wanting to ask someone, because I think it is a completely different perspective than most people would really honestly be able to provide. So being in a touring band, and I would assume at this point, with how long you guys have been doing it, you've been able to tour most of the U.S. at least.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, most of that was on this Anti-Flag tour. Okay. Like, we did a shit ton of East Coast for about 2 years, because that was where I had contacts and I booked everything for myself. So like, I was just working with what I had. It's like, if I don't fucking know someone in California, I can't ask about a show there. So
true.
We so yeah, up until like the signing and like all of that, which we signed in May, but we didn't announce till September. But up until the signing, I booked everything for us, myself.
Okay. So the question I have, as someone who's, and forgive me, someone who's not big in politics in general, and especially not really discussing it, because it just, people can't have just a conversation. It turns into an argument, and at that point, no one's really listening. Which is sad. It is. But I just know that, like, it's, just it's not really ever anything that I want to really typically get into, because whereas I want to learn, like I was saying earlier, like I like learning about perspectives I will obviously never have, being, a man who's 30 something. Like, I'm not going to know what it was like to be a 13-year-old girl in the music scene or whatever. Like, I that's just a perspective I'll never have. And so in being into bands, and having recently in the last handful of years traveling the world, like traveling the US with my wife and seeing different cultures and so forth, and being from the East Coast initially and living here in the Midwest, something I've often wondered is, for someone who is interested in politics and paying attention to the world that they are surrounded by, what do you see when you travel? Like, because I feel like you get a really interesting glimpse, perhaps, into how geographical differences, economical differences, and so forth, geographically, like in touring, that you get to see these things that also gives you a more informed perspective, as opposed, because you're seeing it firsthand as you're touring, and perhaps anyway, and hearing stories from people who are coming to shows and so forth, then someone like myself who's like, well, I'm getting fed something through, my phone or what I see on the newspaper or whatever. Do you think it offers you a completely different perspective than most, because you're able to actually see, some of these things firsthand as you're going to these towns, these cities, and interacting with these people that most people probably aren't, that are trying to engage most people with their political ideas? And I also don't know if I worded that as well as I wanted to, or if it makes sense.
You're fine. it's interesting because it's like, even though we've toured a lot, we're still in something of a bubble. You know, the majority of people coming out to metal and hardcore shows tend to lean liberal, tend to lean progressive. Metal and hardcore are also still incredibly fucking white, so you're still getting a majority of white people. Metal and hardcore tend to be overwhelmingly male, so that's a demographic that, like, that's pretty much like, yeah, like straight white dudes are gonna end up being like most of our audience now. So it's almost unfortunate because it's like, that is like, I would love to be encountering more diversity so as to better enlighten myself as to the perspectives of people who don't fit that particular mold. Now, we did get to go like all over on the Anti-Flag tour, but again, like, we're on tour with Anti-Flag and Stray from the Path. We're not getting like the gun-toting, Bible-thumping, Trump-loving conservatives at those shows at all, because it basically was like the fucking like anti-Trump tour, which is great. Like, I feel very fortunate and like blessed to have had the experience of my first US tour being in such a safe environment for me. But I know that, like, especially when we branch out and are touring with different bands who might not share our politics or just might not be open about politics, so they'll just have bands that are more diverse in that realm. I know it's gonna get interesting. I'm ready for it. At every single show that we play, I invite the audience. I say, please come and talk to me. I was like, even if you hate every fucking word I say on this stage, let's have a conversation about it.
Right.
Let's engage with each other. Let's stand face to face and have a talk from one human being to another and share each other with each other. Because that's, I think, where you do get the most change, is when people are willing to share their perspectives in a respectful, like, and face-to-face, like, discourse. I think is so important, because, like, one of the problems with the internet is that it dehumanizes people, and it's so easy to forget that the person on the other side of this, like, on the other side of the comment that you just read, is a person.
Right.
You're just seeing these words and this idea thrown at you, and it's easy to forget that that's coming from a human being with, like, wants and needs and ambitions and passions and things that they care about. So getting to do that face-to-face forces us to humanize each other and forces us to face the fact that, regardless of our politics or like anything, and like differences of race or religion or sexuality or gender identity, like, we're all people. When you have to look into somebody's fucking eyes and recognize that when you're having a conversation, it's a lot harder to go, oh, well, fuck you. Like, you suck. like, so I love that. I love and welcome the opportunity to engage face to face with people who are different than me. That's, I think, so important, and that, I think that'll end up informing more of my writing. So I hope that answered your question.
No, it did. I mean, it's just kind of interesting because I think, touring musicians, especially as you, like, I mean, Colin was in a band that, not only toured the U.S. quite a bit, but then did a lot of international traveling, and obviously can see, with how active he was in politics and so forth. And granted, he does lean very, like, far the one way he does. But the interesting thing is, I was like, you are in a position to see global politics at that point and see how the other, like, how the world is outside of your little fucking bubble. And that's a perspective most people aren't going to get. Like, that's the thing that I've enjoyed about traveling in the last handful of years. Like, in the active traveling sense, like, my wife and I try to find 2 or 3 places we go every year and go. Yeah. And it's like, like, when we went to Myrtle Beach, like, we, like, hit up South and North Carolina, like, on a long, like, week. And I was kind of shocked at the blatant racism of Myrtle Beach and South and Charleston. Yeah, like, we went to a bar and there literally was a blackface painted. Well, there was that for sure, but we were at a bar and this bar had a blackface mannequin, and and it was wearing a shirt that says "I'm the token black guy," and I was like, "Whoa!" And there was a black dude sitting right next to me at the bar and didn't seem to give a fuck about it, like he was a regular, and I was like, okay." And like it like to me that was weird, and it's like I was
it is
yeah, okay,
it is weird.
Like it was like one of those things where I was like, wow, I don't know how to feel about this, but I was like, but I mean, there's a dude who should be way more offended than me, and apparently he comes here all the fucking time and doesn't seemingly give a shit. So it's like, okay,
there's
like,
also things that you will give a pass to, let slide, normalize for your own mental health. Like, because to make a stink about it, even internally, is to cause internal trauma. So it's like, I get it. Like, I mean, I did, like, when I was growing up, oh my God, that's so much fucking internalized misogyny. It was the fucking worst. I was one of those girls who was like, I'm not like the other girls, like with the implication that other girls are that being a girl is a bad thing. Like, I feel like I wish I could just take little Lauren and be like, no, other girls are great. You're fucking great. Like, yeah, there's a lot of that. And then like internalized racism is like also a thing. It's fucked up. It's fucked up.
Yeah. So something we had talked about before officially recording, quote unquote, that I'll bring up because you said you wanted to get into it. So something I've been kind of wrestling with in the last, I'd say maybe like year, is sort of a mental, I don't even know how to, because I'm still kind of processing it myself as a whole, so I don't really know if I want to call it like a mental blockage or, you know, mental abuse or whatever. So as I was saying earlier, you know, I was born with a cleft lip and palate, and, you know, the advances that technology has made, even like when I had it, like from my uncle and so forth, is like just drastic. But what I have kind of latched onto recently and why I kind of feel this weird complex of like, you know, this person's better than me and, you know, I'm not normal. And, you know, like I was explaining to my parents recently, my dad, like, you know, I was talking because, you know, I'm a heavily tattooed person. I was like, you know, I feel more comfortable being heavily tattooed and stared at because at least that's something I can control. And I was like, but I've never felt normal. And then I realized it was because, you know, growing up, I would go to these doctors and they'd be like, hey, here's a scale. Someone your age, you know, should be at, you know, this height and this weight. This is what's normal based on, you know, someone in your demographic. And here's you, not normal. And here's all the things you're not going to do, you know, like normal people, and always being compared to everybody else and being told like you're not the same as everybody else. And to a degree, like it's kind of made me, I think, grow up a lot different and a lot faster in the sense of like be wanting to not be in a regimented like here's school and everyone has to have the same experience. It's like, no, motherfucker, like I'm different. Like, and just because Johnny Football over here like has a good family and all this kind of shit, I'm sure he has his own problems. Like I kind of became more aware of like that kind of shit. And I think it kind of, like I said, kind of made me feel older than I always am and have been. I've always gravitated toward older people. But I've been thinking a lot about just like this weird mental abuse that like, you know, professional doctors are like inflicting upon me at like a young, like from cognizant
basically
memories.
othering you.
Yeah. And so like, you know, I was talking about that and you were like, oh, that, you know, I want to talk about this thing that it makes me, you know, want to bring up. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think that, oh my gosh, I feel like this probably happens to everyone to some degree, and like you never really notice it until like you talk about it with people.
Right.
So when I was growing up, I was told that I was told a lot of things about myself. Which is very interesting, being told things about yourself. You're like, oh, is that how I am? Okay, tell me more.
So you're saying like in the present time or in retroactively, like someone telling you about yourself like as a kid, like now, or both?
No, like back at
then.
the time.
Okay.
So like, for example, like I was always told as a child that I'm not a math person, because I liked to write.
Okay.
Which is bullshit. I'm incredible at math. And I allowed the fact that people, like my mother would tell me like, oh, you're just not a math person. which is horseshit because it basically trained my brain away from even trying. And it turns out that I'm actually great at math when I'm not being told that I'm not good at it. So
Weird concept.
It's like, yeah, huh?
Weird concept.
Yeah, it's like you have to wonder what other things that we're telling like our kids, like, oh, you're just not good at that. Like you're just not that person. Yeah. And how much it actually ends up shaping what they are and what they do. Also, for example, so I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 5 and was prescribed Ritalin.
It seemed to be like a big thing of people our age. I don't know if it still is. I don't hear about it anymore.
I do somewhat, but only because I'm listening. Like, okay. Just because I care about that as an issue. Right. It definitely was apparently overprescribed.
Oh yeah.
And I know that for me, ADHD medication caused a slew of problems in like my teenage years. When I would crash from it, I would apparently present with symptoms of bipolar disorder, which was something I was diagnosed with at age 16. Spoiler alert, I don't have bipolar disorder because when you took away the ADHD medication, all of my symptoms went away. So, yeah, I don't have bipolar disorder. Nothing wrong with having it, but people were very, very eager to prescribe children whose brains are still developing with mental illnesses that they may or may not even have. Or that also, and I think that also people forget that the brain is not a static thing, and your brain at one age isn't the same brain at another age. So you need to keep, like, you can't just say, like, oh, you're diagnosed with this, you are this forever. Neuroplasticity is a fucking thing, and our brains change and grow and develop, and, like, there are a lot of problems with, like, if you read about it, you're not really supposed to diagnose, like, things like bipolar disorder before a person's brain is finished developing in their 20s. Because there can be so many other factors that will present as symptoms, especially as a teenager, and you're hormonal and kind of all over the place. Anyway, so yeah, I ended up being on a lot of medications for things I didn't really need or have or could have managed in other ways. And I see a therapist today, and we were talking, I don't know how we got onto ADHD, and she's like, I've been thinking about this a lot. She's like, for someone with quote unquote ADHD, you are the most focused, most regimented person. Like, she's like, I'm pretty sure that you don't actually have ADHD. We actually think that a lot of my, like, symptoms were a result of trauma. And I'm also adopted, so that can that can do a lot of things, especially when you're a kid, because there's certain hormones that aren't present in your body because you aren't breastfeeding like a normal, like a child would. Your body isn't releasing the hormones that it would from being cuddled by your biological mother. Like, there's a lot of things that happen in very, very, very early, like, babyhood, that don't happen with people when they are adopted, as, like, especially at a very early age. My therapist believes that a lot of my symptoms and problems are rooted in some of that, which makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, I definitely got slapped with a lot of diagnoses for a lot of things that I don't have, and therapists have confirmed that I don't fucking have some of these things, like, since then. But, like, you spend your whole life thinking, oh, I'm this way, therefore I can't do XYZ, or therefore I'm not like everyone else. Yeah, exactly. And it others you. And I always felt different than other people because, oh, I was the one with ADHD, or I was like, I had a lot of adults telling me who I was as opposed to just letting me be who I was. And I think that probably happens to a lot of people like us. But I mean, it's like I can't really be mad because it's like, you know, as an adult now, which that's fucking hilarious. Not. Like, you see how easy it is to want to put a label on things, so as to feel like you can make sense of your world. So I can understand that in having a child, you would want to be able to be like, oh, they behave this way because this.
Right.
without really taking into account how deciding that this is the reason
Right.
can shape all these other trickle down like factors.
Well,
So yeah, I feel like that's probably happened to a lot of us.
it was kind of interesting. Like a friend of mine was talking about how her and her. Actually, let me rephrase that so I can cut that part out. A friend of mine was talking about how they were adopted in some of the things that they had gone through as a result of just, kind of coming to grips with all of that. Mm-hmm. And so in a conversation we had at one point, granted over drinks, so it always makes things a little bit more like free flowing where you're not like guarded. And I remember being like, it's kind of interesting because like a lot of the things that you feel as far as like not necessarily feeling wanted or kind of questioning a bigger, having more questions than answers to things. I go,
Mm-hmm.
like what's really interesting from my perspective is like I grew up, had a few birth defects, basically told I wasn't, I had a heart murmur, was told I wasn't probably going to live. Then I had a brother who was born just fine, but died, of sudden infant death syndrome. And so it's like, I always have had this weird, not guilt or shame per se, but this thing where I've always been like, I had all these problems and I lived, like why? And then it's like, why did, my brother who had nothing wrong, he passed away and there's nothing there. To then even thinking about like the mental ramifications of like, my parents were at the time, my brother and I, oddly enough, were born on the same day, 2 years apart. And so thinking about how my parents were would have been 26 at the time. And it's like, you lose a child and then, like, because there's really nothing known about SIDS, or how it happens.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things like, thinking about just, you put your child down and then you go and they're not alive anymore. So then even the ramifications of like, okay, like now you obviously have to call like an ambulance and all that kind of stuff. And then police are like, so what did you do? And things like that. And it's like, you're a young couple who had one child who's going through all of these things and these medical bills stacking up, and then this other tragedy happens, and then you have police coming in and be like, "What did you do?" And then maybe like they would separate them and be like, "Okay, like did the to my dad like or from my mom like does he hit them or anything like that? Is he abusive?" Or then like my mom like does just weird shit where it's like you think about all these things and it's like it's I kind of am like, then I start over analyzing. It's like, okay, like it's the the end of the 80s, that we don't have the internet, we don't have technology, we don't know a lot of these things, like just kind of unpacking it all. And it's like, well, no wonder, like we kind of like everyone has their own thing, but it's like, it's kind of weird that someone who went through, and like being, given up for adoption, that like, someone who went through that and me like having lost and the tragedies I kind of endured as a kid and growing up with these things, we have a lot of the similar questions, even though we went through completely different experiences. And it's really interesting, like, when you sit down and talk to people, like, you guys can be so different and have such different upbringings and different experiences, but how oddly familiar everything kind of becomes when you start breaking the insecurities that you're not wanting to present to people and be like, wow, we have so much in common if we just kind of break all the bullshit down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the human experience. There's a reason why there's so many like there's so many like recurring themes in music and art. It's because like there are these things and ideas that tie us all together as people, like trauma and suffering and and like positive things too. But like they're all rooted somewhere.
Yeah.
So, what's just different is the roots, but they manifest in similar ways, which is interesting.
So, kind of getting out of Bummerville right there.
No worries.
Something different that I don't really think I've seen you talk about is your love of reptiles.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it a little bit there when you were discussing, Sharptooth and the representations and so forth. But I don't know if people actually know that is your profession.
Yes.
And it's what you went to school for?
Yeah. So I have a degree in zoology. It's right behind me. Is this on this is going to be on YouTube, right?
Yeah, I can. Well, it's blurry, but yes, for those who will only listen to it, go to the YouTube channel and you can see this.
You can see my degree behind me, and also behind me are multiple enclosures with creatures in them. So
and then I saw a cat running around too in the background at one point.
Oh no, that's my dog. I don't have a cat.
Oh, that's right. We talked about that.
Cats. Like I will aggressively tell you I don't have a fucking cat.
Yeah, you just did.
Sorry. I I'm very allergic to cats, and the only cats I like are the bald ones.
I want to
really
touch
like
one.
the
I
bald.
want to touch one, but I'm also like, I feel like I'd be very like weirded out and be like, you feel like a nutsack.
It does,
Does
but
it?
that's why it's fun. Like,
I
who
don't
doesn't want
know.
to play with the nutsack? No, I'm
I
kidding. Uh, joking, not joking.
TMI
Yeah, no, I love the hairless cats. But they are the only cats that I love.
for obvious
I,
reasons, but yeah.
I am 1,000% a dog person. But yeah, I've always loved reptiles. I had reptiles as a kid. Like that was the thing that I like wanted and liked. Like it's like other kids were like, I want a pet cat. I'm like, I want geckos and I want to breed them because that's a normal 7-year-old's hobby. Uh, so yeah, I went to college for zoology because I figured I'd have a better time getting a job in that field than I would in musical theater. Um, so I did that. I worked in our school's herpetology lab. I did research on box turtles. I was in charge of taking care of the reptiles in the lab for a while. And I interned at the National Aquarium in Baltimore. I worked there for a while. And then now the place that I work is like, it's like a small zoo meets a nature center meets an educational facility. And I help care for the animals there. We do a lot of training with the animals there too, which is super cool. So I get to train crocodiles, which is dope. And my main job is I travel around to schools and libraries and do like after school programs and assemblies with like the animals. So I get to teach, which is really fun for the most part. It's mostly. It's funny because I went into it when I first started working at this place. I was like, I'll do like the programs or birthday parties or whatever, but I don't fuck with kids. Like kids is not, I don't like kids. Actually, I would have told you that I fucking hate kids. But I eventually realized that, oh yeah, kids are just people. So they're just diverse like people are. So when you just treat them like people, then it's actually a similar experience. Just like everyone else. Some kids are fucking awesome and really cool to hang out with and fun to be around. And some are fucking little assholes just like the rest of humanity. So the good ones usually outweigh the bad ones. And it's actually really fun getting to feel like you're shaping people's perspectives on things that are actually really typically misunderstood, which is also kind of like what I do with Sharptooth. So it all makes sense. It all goes back into each other. I get on stage and tell people why they should care about things that they've never cared about before. So
What I mean, I'm not super well versed in herpetology or reptiles. I told you my like nightmare. I had a reoccurring nightmare for, and I'll just divulge it here so that I'm not like, being like I had a weird nightmare I shared with you and not tell anyone. Oddly enough, I'm not super big on reptiles and things like that. I mean, like I have a weird fascination with like fish and like typically we always go to aquariums every traveling thing we do. Actually, my wife, when I told her I was talking to you, and I told her that you were, when we were going back and forth and talking about herpetology and reptiles and all that kind of stuff. So when we were in Vegas, we went to the shitty aquarium they have out there, and no, this tickled me beyond belief. When we got around a corner, there's a bunch of little kids and parents taking photos around this crocodile. But the croc had a boner, and it was like at head level. So like I was just like, I can't wait for everyone to like get their photos, put them on Facebook and all this shit, and it'd be like, your child's got a croc boner right next to its left ear.
oh my god.
I took photos of it. I thought it was funny.
Holy
Typically,
shit.
when I talk about my trip to Vegas, when we were out there, I always talk about how I saw a croc boner, and I thought it was great that all these little kids had photos with croc boners behind them.
That's amazing.
But yeah, so I had this like weird thing because I'm not big on reptiles. That I had like a weird infestation of like iguanas or some kind of lizards, and they would like literally like pile on in like droves above like doors and shit, to where they were like kind of like dripping off of each other because there was just so many of them. But they were overtaking my whole house, and it freaked me out. And I would be like, I just need to get the fuck out of here. And like I would like have to kind of touch one sometimes to get through a door, and it grossed me out. And yeah, so that was like a weird nightmare, like legitimately a nightmare where I'd wake up and be like, whoa. and be like grossed out. But I figured it's better than the one I usually have, which is a reoccurring like car crash, like where I'm always in the passenger seat. I'm always in the passenger seat, and then there's no one driving. I think it's because I'm always like a passenger typically. I don't drive a whole lot or with people, so I always just assume it's because I'm always like in the passenger seat with people and feeling helpless and whatever. And I always wake up just as the accident's about to happen. So it's always very weird. There's probably something there to unravel, I'm sure.
Probably.
Maybe I'll look into that. But yeah, so I mean, it was interesting. Not many people get to actually do what they're passionate about as their job, and let alone when they go to school for it. Typically, the passion gets beaten out of them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate in that I get like in both sides of my career, I get to do what I love. And I mean, it's like any job. Like there's things about it that are fucking awesome, and then there's things about it that are a real pain in the ass because it's any job, and you're working with people, and like there's always going to be. I mean, there's the bureaucracy of all jobs, which can be frustrating in any environment. But yeah, I feel very lucky that like I get to go into work and play with animals that I love and get to tell people about them, which is really exciting.
Kind of wrapping this up. So you're getting ready to go out on tour with Census Fail.
Yes.
It'll actually bring you through here, so I'll actually get to see you guys.
Heck yeah!
Actually,
we're going somewhere where there are people.
I have to. Let me rephrase that because my grandmother is a stickler for not saying you guys as a general blanket statement. So let me rephrase that. You all are coming around on tour, and playing with Census Fail, and you're actually going to be coming around here. So I'm excited to see you all for the first time and see the room shift happen, perhaps.
I'm excited too. So you said that do you live near
Michigan.
Detroit? So you live in Michigan. Okay.
Yep.
That's what I
Grand
thought.
Rapids. So you're going to be playing at the intersection.
Beautiful. We, this is going to be a really interesting tour because we're going out of the country for the first time. So we are officially international, which is very exciting.
You got your passports already?
Huh?
You got your passports ready for your stamps? Or whatever the hell they do with those?
Passports. You want to know what's funny? So all of us have our passports because last winter I decided to go on a cruise and bring my band. Just because I wanted to. So everybody had to get their passports. That was actually before Connor joined, but he already had a passport, which we are doing again at the end of April. We are going out for a week on another cruise. So Sharp Cruise number 2, 2018 is going to be lit ski because we are apparently the bougiest hardcore band on the fucking planet. But yeah, it's really important to us to get to like spend like time together just as a family and to just have fun as opposed to like being touring, which can be sometimes stressful and like, like not everyone is going to get along every single day of the tour. Like for the most part, we get along fantastically, especially compared to what I've heard about other bands. Like apparently we like love each other a weird amount, which is fine. I do a lot of things a weird amount. So mostly involving loving people. So yeah, we're so excited for this Census Fail run. It was kind of unexpected and really thrilling, and it's gonna be weird because it's like Census Fail who does like the fucking post-punk pop punk thing. Then there's us, and we're like a fucking straight up hardcore band. And then the opener is someone called Little Lotus, and they are a SoundCloud rapper, like a sad boy SoundCloud rapper.
So like was it Little Peep that died recently?
I have no idea.
No,
okay. That's not a world that I'm super familiar with.
You're gonna be.
I'm going to be. So
maybe you can get on a track.
A close friend of mine who lives in Dallas, who knows him, says that vetted them, and they were like, yeah, Little Lotus is awesome, you guys are gonna love each other. So I'm excited to make new friends and stoked to get to hang out with Census Fail for a couple of weeks. So that's fucking nuts.
It's gonna be interesting to see Steve drumming for them now.
Steve for Census Fail?
Steve
I just
Colorado.
saw them the other is he? I didn't know.
Yep.
So they I don't know how it happened, but Steve and I became friends on Instagram and have like corresponded a tiny bit. Um, I think it was just like he posted something about the tour, and I was like, sick. And then we just started talking a little bit, and super nice. I got to see them on their current tour. They just came through Baltimore a couple days ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to see that. And I mean, they were fucking sick. And I was excited because Buddy talks before his songs. And that's something I do. I'm like, okay, good. People won't be as annoyed by me doing it. Yay. I don't shut the fuck up. So
I think that'll be an interesting tour. And then speaking of making new friends, Warp Tour, you already talked about that. I mean, the last Warp Tour, and you guys are on the whole fucking thing.
Warp Tour.
And with Adhd.
And with Adhd.
Who were stoked that you're on the whole thing.
Which I cried. Okay, so let me tell you the whole story, I think, of how that went down. So I went to go see them on their current tour with Motionless in White and Ice Nine Kills.
This past Friday.
Yeah, so I went to the New York date and the New Jersey date. A close friend of mine is on the tour, so I was going to be spending time with him. And we were at the New York show, and Adhd had just finished playing, and me and him are walking back to the green rooms just to hang out. And we ran into Jordan on the stairs, and I, was just like, yo, Jordan, stoked to play Warped Tour with you. He like stops and he turns and he like kind of like gives me this look like, who is this person? Like, and he's like, wait, who are you? And I like getting to reach out my hand and say, I'm Lauren Kashan. I'm the vocalist of Sharptooth. We're on one of the Mutant stages for the entire summer. And he like getting to shake his hand like and introduce myself as like a peer to him was like, afterwards I literally like I walked away and I was like, I need a minute because that was a very big deal for me. That band is one of my biggest influences. They are the band that got me into hardcore and into the music scene. I have Hot Damn tattooed inside my mouth. I guess this is a video, so here you go. It says Hot Damn.
That actually held pretty well.
Yeah. I've had it for like 7 or 8 years. I've had it for... yeah, like 7 years, and I haven't had to get it touched up yet.
I'm the weirdo that has the portrait of Keith on his leg.
Oh, you have a portrait of Keith on your leg? That's amazing.
Well, it's actually on my thigh, so...
that's amazing!
But it's actually... hold on just a second.
Sure.
Since this is a medium that we can do this. So, fun story. And this will kind of wrap out the podcast. I had been wanting to write about music for a while. So a friend of mine who does photography for shows was like, hey, like I'm going to mention to my editor to see if he would like you to do like more rock, metal, hardcore stuff. So the very first show I got to do a review for was Every Time I Die. And they moved it from the big room to the room you're actually about to play in. And so this was a photo of Keith from the show. And so he gave this to me as a thing, kind of like, hey, like I was like, I really like that shot. Also, that same show, if you remember the shirt that they had on the Low Teens tour, the Death Cannot Tear Us Apart shirt, that was my friend's photo. They never contacted him about that. That just ended up on the shirt with his watermark cropped out. Yeah. So, anyway, I decided that I obviously knew I was going to get, because like my leg is a bunch of, so far it's a handful of artists that influenced me as a musician and so forth. So I have Steve Perry from Journey with a banner that says "Don't Stop Believin'." On the other side of that is Freddie Mercury, and then now I have Keith. So
that's amazing.
So I ended up getting that tattooed at the Chicago convention last year, and I got it because it's like, it was the first thing where I got to like kind of accomplish a thing I set out to do. Like I never went to college at all. And so anything I've ever done in the music realm, whether it be booking shows, writing about things, even doing this, everything is just through DIY and like just the passion and drive to want to do it because I want to.
Yeah.
And so the fact that like I got to do this story, it was kind of like a thing where they're like, well, it's a midweek show. We don't really have anything going on. So yeah, fuck it. Go ahead and write, so many words. So I ended up doing it, and then it ended up being like the number 3 top story that week that we ran.
Wow.
And kind of proving the point that like people actually do give a shit about like, you know, hardcore and metal in our area and so on and so forth. So I was like, oh, this is really awesome. So it was kind of like a thing like, A, I like the band. B, it's a sick photo. C, it's kind of like the beginning of me like kind of achieving something that I had wanted to do for so long. And then to the point where I ended up covering a brand new show, and I decided that since brand new is kind of pretentious, I wanted to write pretentiously about the show experience. And it was actually the podcast that Shane Told did with Keith, where he was like, you know, I was writing scale and I realized like I was gonna start dumbing shit down, and then I was like, fuck that, like why should I dumb myself down and the experience that I want to put forth for somebody else because they may be minorly inconvenienced to like have to look something up? Like, fuck that. I'm proud of the knowledge I've grown.
Like, be yourself. Like,
right. So I ended up getting paid for that.
That's so sad.
And then I was like, so now I'm a paid writer who's been published in something. When I went to do the Under Oath show review, our photographer wasn't able to show up, so I had a photo pass. So I took photos with my phone.
My God.
And those got published. I was like, I'm actually technically a published concert photographer too. So, and it was
iPhone photos. That's too funny.
Yeah. So it was like, you know, just kind of this amalgamation of like everything like kind of coming together of just like, you know, believing in myself basically. And so I got this like, you know, tattooed on me, and you know, I put it in the Facebook group, and like everyone was like, oh, that's really awesome. It's really awesome. And then some people were like, oh, it kind of looks like Bob Marley or Zach De La Rocha. Cause I mean, it's not as, you know, 3-dimensional as, you know, a photo or whatever.
Portraits are portrait tattoos.
Yeah. But it was funny because at the show in Lansing, like shortly after I got that done, someone I guess from the group was like, "Oh my God, you're the kid with that tattoo." And then like right as I'm standing right next to Keith, and they're like, "Hey, have you seen this kid's tattoo?" And he was like, "Yeah, I saw it." And then just kind of walked away, and I was like, "Sweet." So, yeah. So I'm that person with that go big or go home Adhd tattoo.
That's great.
Yeah, I still feel weird about it, but whatever.
No worries. I mean, like, yeah, it's whatever. I'm probably getting lyrics on my arms at some point from the Marvelous Slut. So that's... I don't think in pictures, I think in words. I'm a lyricist, so all of my tattoos tend to be word-centric. Like, that's just the way that I... or harken back to words, so that's just the way that my brain works. But yeah, like the whole like every time I die, like tweeting at us thing. So after that show, I stayed with some friends in New York that night, and I woke up the next day to my guitarist screenshotted that to me and sent it to me. And I woke up and read it and like just started crying because I cry in response to everything. I'm a huge crybaby. Like happy crying, sad crying. If you see anything that if anybody is really nice to me in the group, my response is always crying. And I always tell everyone too, because fuck it, normalize tears. But yeah,
that's
I
your new band merch. That needs to be on a shirt.
What's wrong? And I'm like, they care.
I did the same thing the other day. I had like a like, oh my God moment. I posted an episode I did with Craig Owens from ex Chiodos, and was doing really good, but like he ended up sharing it, and he was like really super awesome about it and really enjoyed the conversation, which is typically I don't really get the feedback from the person, so it was really interesting. And then I kind of got some people who were like, fuck this kid, like Craig should have bit his fucking head off, and just another egocentric dude who like wants to talk about himself. And I was like, I mean, it's a podcast, like you kind of got to talk about yourself, sort of. And then I was like, dude, if you only realize like I've been struggling with like the idea like how much of myself to interject and how honest do I want to be about like my own shit. But then I was like, but if you're gonna listen to me talk to someone for an hour, like I feel like you kind of need to know like things that I've learned or done or whatever, so you realize like I'm not just like pulling shit out of my ass. And so I was like, all right, well, that sucks. And I was kind of getting upset, like taking it personally. And I was like,
oh, don't read comments on anything ever. Because I don't read comments on anything ever. Unless it's on like my personal page or on the Adhd group. I don't read comments. Because the people because generally if you watch like something on the internet and you're like, oh, that was neat, that was cool, like you enjoyed it. Very rarely does anybody who enjoys something take the time to go, I'm going to write about how much I enjoyed this, because it's not
So far, though, oddly
enjoyment and
enough,
pleasure is a very personal thing.
yeah.
But when you don't like something,
Yeah.
you're like mad at it. You're like, hey, I didn't like this.
Yeah.
Like, or fuck that. Like, when you're angry, that's a more explosive emotion as opposed to an internal experience. So comments are going to be overwhelmingly negative, regardless of how good or bad something is, period. Just because people are more likely to say when they don't like something
Right.
than just say when they do. Like, because if you like it, you just liked it. You enjoyed it and you moved on with your life.
The interesting thing, though, is, like, so far, especially YouTube, I've only gotten positive. Like, I've not gotten anything bad. So, like, it really was, like...
That's very nice for you.
I know. And then, yeah. So, like, when I got bad shit, I was like, oh, like, I knew it was going to happen. But, like, and I really did take it personally. So then, like, I was listening to Ice-T's podcast that he doesn't really do anymore. But he always just, like, has, like, like what I call, like, daily game. Like, where he just, like, says something that's so, like, fucking profound that you're just like, fuck that. Yeah, like, I'm inspired now. And so I tweeted that I was, like, you know, like, I tried to, like, glean, like, something that I could turn the bad into a positive and learn from it. And I was like, you know, I want to, like, and I tweeted at Ice-T. I was like, I want to, like, you know, I was listening to Ice-T's podcast and, like, you know, said something about, like, haters and, you know, that they basically, you know, paraphrasing that, like, you know, haters only hate on people who are doing something they can't or aren't willing to do. And I go, and so, like, at that point, like, you know, that's just got to be my takeaway. To which Ice-T actually tweeted to me. He was like, haters only hate up. They don't hate on anyone below them. And I was like, and my phone blew the fuck up with people retweeting and, like, commenting. And I was like, the fact Ice-T, like, tweeted at me, not like some, just like a comment, like, where it's like,
that's incredible.
I was like, holy fuck. And, like, so I've been playing this long game, like, for the last, I said in the beginning of the year, like, I'm going to try to get him on my podcast somehow. And, like, he likes all my tweets. Like, when I do that, like, within a couple of minutes of me tweeting it, he'll... Ice-T like this. So I'm like, all right, so this is the first reply I've gotten.
So happy.
This is the first reply I've gotten. So I'm like, you could say things are getting serious now.
Hi, Ice-T.
I know. So I love when people, like, feel good. So when I saw you guys, like, get the thing and you're like, oh my God. And I'm like, I just had that moment myself where I'm like, oh my God. Ah! And it just feels good to feel excited about something when in a world where people are so quick to, like, be shitty about something like that.
Yeah, it is wonderful feeling acknowledged in a positive way. Like, that is infinitely meaningful to me. So yeah, when people do say nice things or reach out, or especially, yeah, like people that we really look up to, make us feel included or acknowledge us, it's really important. So I mean, I try to do that to even, like, kids who fucking message me on, like, Instagram or whatever and just want to say hi. Like, I respond to everything just because I'm like, I want you to feel validated and, like, like, welcome too. So
continuing on with the feeling welcomed and appreciated, where can everyone follow you and plug your upcoming tour so people can come give you words of encouragement and praise and heap it upon you? And buy lots of your merch so you can...
If you're native, I'm not going to fucking read it anyway, so you can eat a whole dick.
For $1 or $1 million, let's play this game. How much are you willing to eat a dick for?
To eat a dick for. Not suck a dick.
Eat it.
Eat a dick. Arguably less fun, depending on what you're into. But yeah, so you can find us. I mean, our music is on every music platform. So Spotify, like Apple Music, iTunes, you name it, YouTube, we're on there. We've got, like, we have obviously a Facebook, or if you literally look up Sharptooth, we're the Sharptooth. So
the Sharptooth, ooh.
Well, we're just it's like, no, there's like another Sharptooth, but I think there's like a space in their name, and like I think they're getting a cease and desist soon. So goodbye. And yeah, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. I don't have a Twitter, but like you can also like follow me on Instagram too. Our Instagram is like at Sharptooth MD. And then my Instagram is at Kashan Claws, KASHANCLAWS. And I talk to everybody and like making friends. So come be my friend.
The other thing I like to do is end these with a song. So what would you like me to end it to? And maybe a quick story about it.
Oh, is it? one of our songs or just any song?
As long as I can find it on YouTube, typically that's my new fun answer. If I can find it on YouTube.
Play something by the Wiggles. Don't do that. Play. Yeah, you can. Yeah, play "Clever Girl," which is the title track off of our full-length album called "Clever Girl." Yes, it is a Jurassic Park reference. Yes, that's why there's velociraptors on everything. And no, if you see in Hot Topic a shirt that just says "Clever Girl" on it, it's not a Sharptooth merch.
Cease and desist.
Oh my god, find $1 for every person who like found like an actual piece of like Jurassic Park merch. Is like, is this a Sharptooth? That we're like, no, it's our thing is a reference. Like, man, there's a lot of kids who haven't seen this movie. Shit, I feel old. Anyway, Clever Girl, roar.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. And
thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, I'm glad it went all over the place, actually. I know
Me
some
too,
people, I'm sure some people are
that
probably
is
going to be
who I
like,
am.
what the fuck was this? I can't wait to read the comments on this and get really bummed out.
Sick. Can't wait. That you will get terrible comments because I'm a woman and people hate us doing anything. So,
well, it's fun.
Hooray!
It's interesting. I actually have been trying, like, sadly, I feel like, you know, there's not a lot of women on podcasts and a lot of different things. So, like, it's something I actively try to do. And a lot of times, like, I kind of, like I was saying earlier, like with the person out of Portland, I get a lot of like, what do you do and what are you trying? Like, it's almost like an arm's length. Like, what do you want from me? And it's like, I want to engage in an interesting conversation with you. Like, yeah. I know we
have reasons for being suspicious.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
People aren't always kind to us, and
so hopefully this wasn't too bad, and it wasn't, you know, the questions maybe you've been asked a million times.
I thought it was great, and I had a great time.
Cool. Well, maybe you'll be one of the handful of people who actually shares these things that we do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll share anything where I'm talking about how much money you need to pay me for me to drink my own urine. So that's where we started, and that's where we can finish.
All right. Number one, not a number two. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks again.
You too.
See you soon.